Please welcome Glenn Hutchins, Brookings Institution Board Co-Chair.
Good afternoon. I'm Glenn Hutchins, as I said, co-chair of the Brookings Board of Trustees. And on behalf of my co-chair, Suzanne Nora Johnson, who can't be with us today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Brookings, which we consider to be the world's premier think tank. It's my privilege to have a responsibility for Brookings, which stands for quality, independence, and impact, whose research drives real results. Notably, Brookings is committed to nonpartisan scholarship. Our work is grounded in the proposition that sound policy starts with facts, thoroughly analyzed, rigorously tested, and thoughtfully applied to the world's most complex challenges. Today, we'll hear from a leader who exemplifies the Brookings mission. Over the course of his long career in Washington, President Biden has consistently shown his commitment to evidence-based policymaking. As we have done for over 100 years, our team has proudly contributed to the important work of the last 4 years. Our scholars helped with the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Secure 2.0 Act. To welcome President Biden, I'm delighted to introduce Cecilia Rouse, who has served as President Brookings for about a year now. Before taking this role, many of you probably know that she was chairman of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. We are thrilled to have recruited her to Brookings, though we owe the President an apology for poaching one of his finest. Dr. Rouse, the stage is yours.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Glenn. On behalf of the Brookings Institution, it is my profound honor to welcome President Biden to our campus today. As Glenn mentioned, I had the opportunity to work for President Biden from 2001 to 2003. So if I may, boss, this isn't just a professional honor, it's a personal pleasure to welcome you to Brookings. Over the years, our institution has had the privilege of hearing from several US presidents, including John F. Kennedy, Johnson, Ford, both Bushes, Clinton, and Obama. President Biden's visit continues Brookings' proud tradition of promoting thoughtful discussions on the most pressing issues of our time with leaders from across the political spectrum. Today, President Biden will focus on one of those critical challenges, our nation's economy. Throughout his tenure, President Biden has prioritized long overdue investments in our country's infrastructure and its people, working to build an economy capable of addressing challenges such as inequality and climate change. His vision is rooted in the belief that a strong economy allows all Americans to contribute productively and earn a good living to support themselves and their families. An economy that works for all. This is the vision that President Biden will speak to today. With that, it is my great pleasure to turn the floor over to President Biden. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
I'm here to steal her back. You're the best, Cece.
Thank you.
You really are. Thank you. Well, this is only a 400-page speech. You know, I wanted to talk about how the economy, and it is a daunting task to talk about the transition we're trying to initiate here. I want to thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Cece, for the introduction and for the leadership you served as chair of my Council of Economic Advisors. It's great to be back in Brookings Institution. I started here 400 years ago as a senator. God, it's hard to believe that's long ago. Oh, I know, anyway. But, and then as vice president, and when I was thinking about running for president, I came here, and now as president. Last month, I spoke to the Economic Club of Washington, D.C. about the pivotal actions we took to rescue the economy from the devastating harm caused by that way that, in my view, the pandemic was handled, and how we delivered immediate economic relief to those most in need. We got back to full employment, got inflation back down, managed a soft landing that most people thought was not very much likely to happen. Today, Here at Brookings Institution, I'd like to talk about pivotal actions we've taken to rebuild the economy for the long haul. And how we're at a critical, in my view, moment in the direction of the economy is going to take. Next month, my administration will end and a new administration will begin. Most economists agree the new administration is going to inherit a fairly strong economy, at least at the moment. An economy going through fundamental transformation that's laid out a stronger foundation and a sustainable, broad-based, highly productive growth. That is my profound hope that the new administration will preserve and build on this progress. Like most great economic developments, this one is neither red nor blue. And America's progress is everyone's progress. After decades of trickle-down economics that primarily benefited those at the very top, we've written a new book that's growing the economy, the middle out and the bottom up, that benefits thus far everyone. And this is going to be the test going forward. Over 16 million new jobs, the most in any single presidential term in American history. The lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in the last 50 years. 20 million applications for new business records. I mean, it's for new business, that is a record, I should say. Stock market hits record highs. I wish I owned a lot of stock. The worst part of all this, I acknowledge at Brookings, for 36 years I was listed as the poorest man in Congress. What a foolish man. Anyway, 401ks are up. More than $1 trillion in private sector investment in clean energy and advanced manufacturing in just 2 years alone. After decades of sending jobs overseas for the cheapest labor possible, companies are coming back to America, investing and building here and creating jobs here in America, in my view, where they belong. And of course, this economic growth is not without pain. The entire world faced a spike in inflation due to disruptions from the pandemic and Putin's war in Ukraine. We acted quickly to get inflation down with the help of Republicans and Democrats. Inflation came down to pre-pandemic levels. Wages have increased, but still too many working and middle-class families struggle with high prices for housing and groceries and the daily needs of life. At the same time as inflation and interest rates continue to fall, we've entered a new phase of our economic resurgence. With the outcome of this election, we also face an inflection point. Do we continue to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, investing in all of America and Americans, supporting unions and working families, as we have the past 4 years, or do we move backward? In my view, backslide to an economy that benefited those at the top while working people in the middle class struggled for a fair share of growth and economic theory that encouraged industries and livelihoods to be shipped overseas. And I might add, I'm not anti-corporation. For 36 years, I represented corporate America. My state has more corporations registered in my state than every other state in the union. So I'm mildly accustomed to corporate America. And to see it grow is useful and helpful and necessary. But to make the most of the opportunities ahead of, I want to share key pages from our middle-out, bottom-up economic playbook and lay down what I believe to be a new set of benchmarks to measure against the next 4 years and see whether this theory is more than just a phenomenon. 4 years ago when I came to office, 3,000 Americans were dying per day from the pandemic that infected and then had a profound effect on our economy. Not only ours, but around the world. Millions of Americans lost their jobs or at risk of losing their homes. Hundreds of thousands of factories and businesses, hundreds of thousands, closed and creating despair in communities. I remember when I was campaigning, they'd say, my dad used to work at that factory. My grandfather works at that factory. It's gone. People lost hope. They lost hope, particularly through the Midwest and other areas of the country. Supply chains was shattered. Prices soared in everything from cars to homes to appliances. The previous administration, quite frankly, had no real plan to get us through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. In fact, there's an old saying, if the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Over the course of decades, Republican leadership, and I'm not those of you who know anything about me and my career in the Senate, I had as many Republican friends as Democratic friends, for real. I'm not one of these, anyway, I won't get going. But I've never been a big fan of trickle-down economics. It was a hammer that was hammering working people. My dad used to say, my dad was a well-read man who he got accepted to go to Hopkins, but during the war he never got to go. But my dad used to talk about it. He said, Dad, Joey, not a whole lot trickles down on my kitchen table at the end of the month. Slashing taxes for the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, diminishing public investment in infrastructure, in education, in research and development. And keep your eye on it. We're going to find out whether or not what they want to do on those areas continue to slash, does it make sense or not. Offshore jobs and factories took off for cheaper labor overseas, destroying unions while imposing cost on those products made in America. And despite the mythical reputation to pay for itself, trickle-down economics deeply worsened our fiscal outlook, in my view. To offset the cost, advocates of trickle-down economics ripped the social safety net by trying to privatize Social Security and Medicare, trying to deny access to affordable health care and prescription drugs, lifting the fortunes of the very wealthy, often meant taking the rights of workers away to unionize and bargain collectively. And by the way, I'm all for the very wealthy. I'm not joking. You can make as much money as you can, good for you. But everybody's got to pay their fair share. It meant rewarding short-termism in pursuit of short-term profits, extraordinary high executive pay, instead of making long-term investments in many cases. As a consequence, our infrastructure fell further behind. The flood of cheap imports hollowed out our factory towns. Remember Infrastructure Week? We had Infrastructure Week for 4 years and nothing got built. Well, everybody said when I wanted to have an infrastructure bill that mattered, over $1.3 trillion, we'd never get it done. We got it done. Next president has a game plan I laid out, and by the way, he's going to find, since I made a promise I'd invest as much in red states as blue, he's going to have trouble not doing it. Because you're going to have a lot of red state senators who are opposed to all and didn't vote for it, deciding it's very much in their interest to build the facilities that are on this block. Economic opportunity and innovation became more concentrated in few major cities, while the heartland and communities were left behind. Scientific discoveries and inventions developed in America were commercialized in countries like China, bolstering the manufacturing investment and jobs instead of the economy. Even before the pandemic, this economic agenda was clearly failing. Working and middle-class families were being hurt. The pandemic and the economic crisis revealed a failure for everyone to see and to feel. And you know, one of the things that's going on here, they just turned off my, I'm going to go down. I lost the electricity here. But anyway, one of the things we found is that, you know, we invented the computer chip, size of the tip of your little finger, to power everyday lives, from vehicles to advanced weapons, cell phones, everything in between. The United States invented these computer chips, but over time we stopped making them. In the very beginning, we produced 40% of them in the world. Well, they all went overseas almost, virtually all. So when the pandemic hit, we found out how vulnerable America was. Supply chains abroad got shut down in the Far East because people got sick. The factories making the chips closed. And all of a sudden, everybody started to learn about supply chains, a phrase that was probably used more in the last 4 years than the last 40 years. No, I'm serious. Couldn't get these chips. Prices soared. For example, it takes over 3,000 chips to build an American automobile, 3,000. But when the overseas factories making those chips shut down, the production stopped, and the cost of new cars soared. You know, it didn't have to be that way. And I was determined to change that. I remember looking at my staff and saying, I'm going to South Korea. And they said, you're what? Oh, you think I'm kidding? See, the guy next to you is a brilliant economist. He didn't think I was so brilliant going overseas. But all kidding aside, I came to office with a different vision for America. That's been consistent with my record, good, bad, or indifferent, since I've been a senator. Grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. Invest in America and American products. And when that happens, everybody is. The wealthy still do very well. And all of America, no matter where they lived, whether they went to college or not. I was determined to restore U.S. leadership in industries of the future. 4 years later, we have proof that the playbook is at least now working. Within the first 2 months of office, I signed the American Rescue Plan, the most significant economic recovery package in our history. And I also learned something from Donald Trump. He signed checks for people for $7,400 because we passed the plan. And I didn't, stupid. Anyway. But all kidding aside, I realize we're talking about the impact of politics, but the economic basic principles are what we're after. We helped with that passed that act, we helped vaccinate the nation. And as we return to full employment, this was just the beginning. We understood we needed long-term investments for the future. Investing in America agenda, which includes my bipartisan infrastructure law, CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Together, they mark the most significant investment in America since the New Deal. And that's a fact. Whether it's good or bad, that's the fact. The Inflation Reduction Act alone is the most significant investment in climate and energy ever anywhere in the entire world. We were told we couldn't get it done. We got $368 billion. We make these investments. When we make them, we buy America. Buy American has been the law of the land since the 30s. I won't go back, it takes too much time. But you go back to the laws Lincoln, my lord. You go back to the laws that Roosevelt passed about allowing unions to resist being stepped on and organized. Well, there's a provision, a Buy America provision. I was a senator a long time. I thought I was pretty informed. I didn't know it existed. And by the way, former presidents didn't know. If they knew, they didn't say anything about it. He says the money that the president authorizes the Congress to spend should be used by the president to hire American workers and buy American products. There's an exemption. If you couldn't find the American product, American worker, you could go overseas. But you had to show it. Well, guess what? Past administration, including my president, failed to buy America. But not on my watch. We're modernizing our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, our clean water system, affordable high-speed internet systems, and so much more. And by the way, if you think about the high-speed internet systems, they're as consequential to farmers as electricity was during the administration of Roosevelt. I'm serious. You can't function without it. And we've incentivized building all these large federal projects with American products and American union, mostly union labor. New pathways into these jobs, including a record number of registered apprenticeships that we've made sure occurred. As I noted earlier, when I came to office, semiconductor manufacturing had moved overseas. I was determined to bring it back, so it wouldn't be at the end of the supply chain, but at the beginning of the supply chain. And that's what we've done with my CHIPS and Science Act, which has attracted $350 billion in private sector investment in America, including from Korea and from Taiwan. I remember when we went to digress, I shouldn't because of a long speech, but to digress just a moment, went to South Korea. And I met with Yoon and I met with Samsung. I said, why are you making this billions-dollar investments in what we call the Field of Dreams outside of Columbus, Ohio? He said, because you have the most capable workers in the world, and it's the safest place in the world for me to make my investment. These investors are building what they call new fab. You all know this, but a fab is new factories, but they're these giant things, big as football fields. And guess what? When they're built, they employ thousands of people. And guess what? The average salary, $102,000. And you don't need a college degree to do the job. These investments, massive chips factories, these fabs, these size of several football fields. As I said, in the Field of Dreams from all across America, from New York to Ohio to Arizona. And when I ask these companies why they're investing, again, not a joke. I give my word, and you all know that. You're businesswomen, man. You all know it. They say we have the most qualified workers in the world. Everybody thinks that, I have trouble with my union friends. They're not very good salesmen for themselves. Everybody thinks, the average person out there thinks, I want to be an electrician. 5 years later, as an apprentice, you can become an electrician. Look, CHIPS investments are creating over 125,000 jobs so far. Many of those jobs are paying over 100 grand a year, and we don't need a college degree, as I said. And it's not just fabs. These investments are creating opportunities for entire communities. Small businesses creating even more jobs when they move. When you build, for example, you build one of these fabs, whether it's in Syracuse or wherever, they're all over the place. Guess what? You know what happens? They end up building drugstores, coffee shops, automobile dealerships. They build entire communities because thousands of people move in who can afford to live a decent life. In fact, and we knew in the beginning, this wasn't going to come to fruition in my campaign, my administration. It takes time to get this done. But watch 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years from now. We'll soon be the only economy in the world to have all 5 of the major chip companies operating in the United States of America. It's not only creating thousands, it will create thousands of jobs and good paying jobs, building chips factory, but also creating those jobs for workers installing more solar panels, batteries, selling more electric vehicles than ever before. You know, that's a construction boom and manufacturing boom all across America. It's just going to continue to pick up with the billions of dollars being invested. When faced with unfair practices from abroad, we've taken a tough but targeted actions on behalf of the American worker, American businesses, and factory towns. You know, we know the pandemic and Russian war in Ukraine and inflation created enormous pain and hardship all across America. It's true for every major economy in the world. But we took aggressive action that brought prices down. For example, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, causing gas prices to spike globally, I ordered the biggest release of ever in our Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's all that you all know. Most people listening wouldn't, but that's all that oil we've saved up. And we challenged the oil and gas companies to take their record profits and invest more in production. Invest more in production. Today, American energy production is at record levels, including in oil and gas production. Gas prices are down to $3. $3, below the price before Russia's invasion. In addition, we've successfully pushed back all the oil released at a much lower price, and we've refilled the facilities, making the taxpayers in the process $3.5 billion. Brought it out, got it back, a hell of a lot cheaper to fill it back up. Now inflation is coming down faster than almost anywhere in the world in advanced economies. As inflation eased and the strong labor market persisted, inflation-adjusted wages and incomes began to rise. Average after-tax income is up almost $4,000 than prices on average for average Americans. 80% of working-age Americans have jobs, near a multi-decade high. We're creating a record jobs. 60% of all Americans who chose to pursue a four-year degree, who chose not to pursue a four-year degree. With our historic backing of union, public support for unions is the highest it's been in more than half a century. And the labor movement is expanding and changing, and new companies are in industries. Here's why it's important for all workers. I asked the Treasury Department when I was pushing for union expansion to do a study. They found that when union wages go up, everybody's wages go up across the board. It matters. The middle out, bottom up playbook is also asking that the very wealthy the most profitable corporations, begin to pay their fair share. I won't use the usual site that's used. We got 1,000 billionaires in America. Their average federal tax is 8.2%. Anybody want to trade with them? Well, look, my predecessor's $2 trillion tax cut overwhelmingly benefits the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, delivering tax cuts to the top 1% worth more than 50 times the tax cuts that went to middle-class families receive. My approach is leading to better results for everyone. I kept my commitment that no one, and it didn't make me very popular with Democrats, no one earning less than $4,000 a year would see $400,000 a year would pay an additional single penny in additional taxes. No one. Not only I fought hard to expand the child tax credit for working families, but cut child poverty nearly in half. And by the way, it increases economic growth more women can go back to work, more women can grow the economy, expanded tax credits to make health insurance more affordable for millions of Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. By the way, the other team tried to get rid of it, 51 votes, okay? After a decade of severe underfunding, I fought hard to make the IRS have a budget with enough personnel and technology. And it's awful hard. It's easy to go after my taxes, not a problem. You know, and I make a good living. You pay me a lot of money as a president. But for the very wealthy, it's awful hard. You need more personnel. And guess what? We finally, after the fight, got more personnel. Never did I think I'd be fighting to get more tax collectors. We got more folks in the department. Result, the IRS has already collected over $1 billion in unpaid taxes from the super wealthy that had not been paid in the past. Look, folks, our economic playbook also includes increasing fair competition. I'm a capitalist. But capitalism without competition is not capitalism, it's exploitation. But not on my watch. My Inflation Reduction Act took on Big Pharma, reduced the price of insulin for seniors with diabetes to pay only $35 a month until close to the average of $400 a month. You know, when I was trying to sell this to the American public, I'd go around the country doing town meetings and say, anybody has a prescription from a major drug company in America? Come with me, get an Air Force One. I will take you to Toronto, to Berlin, to Rome, to anywhere in the world. I'll get you that same exact prescription from the same exact company for somewhere between 40 and 60% less. Well, the Inflation Reduction Act also finally gives Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices for seniors across the board. It's already passed. Starting next month, out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for seniors, total prescription drug costs, we capped at $2,000 a year, no matter how much they spend, no matter how expensive their drugs. And you all know it, because some of you, like me and others, have lost families to cancer and cancer treatment. Those drugs, cancer drugs, cost $10, $12, $14 million a year. These other reforms not only save seniors money, not only saves the patient money, but guess what? It saves every one of you taxpayers money, because the federal government is not paying out $160 billion over the next 10 years that it had to pay now. Because they're not paying that, they're paying $35, not $400 for the prescription. Exorbitant prices of pharmaceutical companies have been charging. We're also lowering costs by eliminating junk fees. Junk fees are those hidden costs that can add up to hundreds of dollars for the average American family. You know, hidden costs like excessive banking overdraft fees. So I didn't realize I had the power to do this, but we brought them down from average of $35 a month for an overdraft to $5 a month. Cost the banks a lot of money, but it was fair. $35, deal with the overdraft. And in addition to that, there's late fees for credit cards, apartment application fees. I know most of us don't even look at that, but just to apply. Hidden hotel fees or family seating arrangements on flights. A lot of you got that one down. I don't know about all of you, but maybe it's the Irish in me, but I hate being played for a sucker. No, I'm serious. People get angry when they find this out. Fair competition is especially important for small businesses that have been crushed by decades of concentrated corporate power. That's important because small businesses represent nearly 50% of the entire GDP of the American economy. Because of our policies and confidence of entrepreneurs in the economy, we've seen 20 million, since I became president, 20 million new business applications during this administration. The most of any presidential term in history, a record. Black businesses ownership is doubling. Hispanic business ownership is up by 40% since the pandemic. Share of women in business is also on the rise. It all has benefit not just those groups, but all of the economy. Every single application for a new business license is like an act of hope, a confidence. There's so much more from our playbook. Bottom line is, in 4 short years, we've come a long way. From a excuse me for my cold. if I apologize. From the crisis we inherited, we not only beat the pandemic, we broke from the economic orthodoxy that has failed this nation, in my view, for a long time, a theory that led to fewer jobs, less economic growth, and bigger deficits. I had a fundamentally different theory. My theory was the strongest economy is built from the bottom up and the middle out, from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. And the best way to build in America was to invest in America, invest in American products, invest in American people, not by handing out tax breaks to those at the top. And I'm not looking, look, I don't want to get in, we can talk about taxes. But it was long past time for America to make a generational investment in our infrastructure, in our manufacturing base, in the technological edge in our clean energy future. I know it's been hard for many Americans to see, and I understand it. I just tried to figure out how to put three squares on the table. But I believe it was the right thing to do, not only to lift America out of economic crisis caused by a pandemic, but set America on a stronger course for the future. And we did that. We don't take my word for it. Here's how Time magazine and other commentators describe the economy I'm leaving to my successor. And there's a number of these quotes. President-elect Trump is receiving the strongest economy in modern history, which is the envy of the world. I'm going to say something outrageous. I know a fair amount about foreign policy. I've known every major world leader for long, been around for 500 years. I know these guys. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't change their economy with ours. Can you think of one, any major nation? Says, I want to trade. I don't want to trade. I'll keep mine. I like what I'm doing. Let me close with this. By all accounts, the incoming administration is determined to return the country to another round of trickle-down economics and another tax cut for the very wealthy that will not be paid for, or if paid for, is going to have a real cost, once again causing massive deficits, or significant cuts in basic programs of healthcare, education, veterans benefits. On top of that, he seems determined to impose steep universal tariffs on all imported goods brought to this country, on the mistaken belief that foreign countries will bear the cost of those tariffs rather than the American consumer. Who do you think pays for this? I believe this approach is a major mistake. I believe we've proven that approach is a mistake over the past 4 years. But we all know in time, what will happen. I've never agreed with Ronald Reagan's approach to the economy, although I got along with him very well. But I did agree with something he said. President Reagan said, and I quote, "Facts are stubborn things." Facts are stubborn things. They are. Here are the facts. A set mark of benchmarks, if you will, that we should measure the success or failure of our next 4 years. During my presidency, we created 60 million new jobs in America. Will the next president create jobs, or like Herbert Hoover, be the only president to lose jobs in his administration? During my presidency, will we see the lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in 50 years? Will the unemployment be higher or lower in the next 4 years? We have had a strong economic growth of 3% on average on a yearly basis. Will the next president have a stronger or weaker economic growth? And inflation, yes, inflation. We're battling through worldwide effects of the pandemic, Putin's war in Ukraine, and supply chain disruptions. I'm leaving the next president with an inflation rate that's near 2%. Where will inflation be at the end of the next president's term? Look, these are simple, well-established economic benchmarks used to measure the strength of any economy, the success or failure of any president's 4 years in office. They're not political or rhetorical opinions. They're just facts, simple facts, as President Reagan called them, stubborn facts. And one more fact as I prepare to leave office. You know, there is no country on earth better positioned to lead the world in the years to come than America. Think about what stunned me. And again, I'm going to say something outrageous. I have as much experience in foreign policy as any president in the history of the United States has had. I was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. Anyway, I spent a lot of time. I know all of them. Well, the decisions we make over the next 4 years have been transformative to the nation. But I tell you what stunned me, and I'm not being a hyper-American here. I can't name a single country in the world that doesn't think, put it this way. If we're not leading the world, who does? Not a joke. I'm not being wise guy. If we do not lead the world, what nation leads the world? Who pulls Europe together? Who tries to pull the Middle East together? How do we do in the Indian Ocean? What do we do in Africa? We, the United States, lead the world. And you all are extremely experienced women and men. You know many of these leaders. You know many of these countries. Find me one that says we're not or wish we weren't. Look, my hope and belief is that the decisions and investments are now so deeply rooted in the nation that's going to be politically costly and economically unsound for the next president to disrupt or cut. You know, some of my friends in the Republican Party, when I do States of the Union, who holler and like, you know, those things, they're against all the things we did. Keep your eye on them. Tell me where they want the programs we voted for them to cut in their states. Show me the most conservative Republicans willing to take away the factories that are going to be built in their states. Going to be interesting. Going to be interesting. Look, I pray to God because I think everybody has an opportunity to reconsider their growth. I pray to God the President-elect throws away Project 2025. I think it would be an economic disaster for us in the region. In fact, consider one additional fact. The historic investments we've made went to more red states than blue states. Not a politically smart thing to do, and I knew what I was doing. I knew people would be angry. But the reason they're red states and they need it more is because the decisions they made. And geography. Will the next president stop a new electric battery factory in Liberty, North Carolina? Will create thousands of jobs? Will he shut down a new solar factory being built in Carterville, Georgia? Are they going to do that? You know, will we deny seniors living in red states $35 a month insulin? I believe the only way for a president to lead America was to lead all of America. And I believe the economy I'm leaving at the moment, and others could do better than I did. I'm not saying it was perfect, but ends up at this moment the best economy, strongest economy in the world. And for all Americans, doing better. So we got a lot to do, and I'm leaving the presidency, but I'm not going away. It's bad news for y'all. Because I think we got to bring this country back together. When I announced my candidacy for president, I said I was running for 3 reasons. One was to restore the soul of America. Just decency in the way we treat one another. Politically, the way we treat one another. I know you know that back when Pat was around and others, we had vicious fights. We'd go and sit and have lunch together in the Senate dining room. I'm taking more of your time than I should, but one of the things that I realized when I was vice president, Barack wanted me because of my background in foreign policy and my ability to work in the Congress fairly well. And so about 6 years in, I decided to go up to the Senate dining room. I'm president of the Senate, to sit at the table where Democrats and Republicans sit together and began to listen again, just talk to people. Well, guess what? No place to go. You've been to the senator's dining room where they take you into the room where you can eat with other senators and other people. But right, the doors on the left of that elevator are private dining. Used to be a long buffet table. You walk in, a long table sitting, I guess, 16, 18 people on the right, parallel with the table, and you walk through an archway, and there's a table going the other way. One was a Democratic table, one was a Republican table. And when there weren't enough to sit at any one table, then they all sit together. It's hard to really dislike an individual that you strongly disagree with when you find out his wife is dying of breast cancer, or he just lost a child, or he's having serious physical problems himself. We knew each other. I really mean it. Barack used to drive Barack crazy when we met every morning at 9 o'clock, and with his last priest, we'll talk to one another when the day ended. And always give him, he said, I know. All politics is personal. But it is. It is. I watched Teddy Kennedy and Jim Eastland rip each other apart on the floor and then go down and have lunch together. So one is to restore the soul of the country. The second thing to do, I was trying to do when I ran, was to begin to restore the middle class, to focus on people most in need. And thirdly, was to bring the politics together again. Again, we don't have to agree with one another, but we sure in hell have to stick with the system that's allowed us to strongly disagree and yet keep within the confines of the admonitions of the Constitution. I've taken much too much of your time, and I apologize, but you're among the most informed people in Washington. And I would really appreciate down the road here a little bit any constructive criticism you have, and I'm sure you have some. All right, thank you so very much for having me.